Jimmy Page has spent a lifetime surrounded by legends, but no ghost has followed him more persistently than the memory of John Bonham, the thunderous drummer whose death abruptly ended Led Zeppelin and permanently altered Page's inner world. For years, fans believed Led Zeppelin simply dissolved because it was the respectful thing to do, but behind that public decision was a far deeper truth, one rooted in grief, guilt, and a bond that could never be replaced. John Bonham was not just the drummer of Led Zeppelin, he was its heartbeat, its raw power, the unpredictable force that turned Page's intricate guitar work into something primal and dangerous. From the moment Led Zeppelin formed in 1968, Page knew Bonham was irreplaceable. His playing wasn't just technically brilliant, it was emotional, explosive, and instinctive, a style that could not be taught or replicated. Bonham didn't follow the guitar, he challenged it, pushed it, sometimes even fought it, and that tension created the band's unmistakable sound. When Bonham died on September 25, 1980, at age 32, Page didn't just lose a bandmate, he lost a creative mirror, a brother, and the one musician who made Led Zeppelin feel alive rather than calculated. The night Bonham died remains etched into Page's memory with painful clarity. After an afternoon of heavy drinking, Bonham fell asleep and never woke up, choking on his own vomit. It was a senseless, brutal end that left Page numb. In later reflections, Page admitted that the shock didn't arrive all at once, it crept in slowly, manifesting as disbelief, then rage, then an overwhelming sense of emptiness. He has said that no rehearsal, no conversation, no future plan ever made sense again without Bonham. Led Zeppelin had survived chaos before, exhausting tours, substance abuse, tragedies like the death of Robert Plant's young son in 1977, but Bonham's death was different. It wasn't a challenge to overcome, it was a line that could not be crossed. Page has explained that Zeppelin was a chemistry, not a brand. Remove one element and the reaction stops. Though many bands continue after losing key members, Page felt doing so would be dishonest, even cruel to Bonham's legacy. He believed that Led Zeppelin without Bonham would be an imitation of itself, something hollow wearing a familiar name. That conviction didn't come easily. In the months after Bonham's passing, Page spiraled inward, retreating from public life and music almost entirely. The guitar that once felt like an extension of his body became heavy in his hands. Friends recall that he struggled with guilt, questioning whether the band's lifestyle, relentless pressure, and unchecked excess had contributed to Bonham's death. Page has never publicly assigned blame, but he has acknowledged that the culture surrounding Zeppelin normalized extremes, especially drinking, and Bonham, who was deeply sensitive and prone to emotional swings, often bore the heaviest weight of it. Bonham's struggles were never hidden from Page. He knew his friend missed his family intensely while on tour, that fame aggravated his anxiety, and that alcohol became both escape and fuel. Page has since admitted that the signs were there, but youth, success, and momentum made it easy to believe they were invincible. When that illusion shattered, Page was left confronting not only loss but responsibility. In interviews years later, he described the period after 1980 as a time when silence felt safer than sound. Music carried memories he wasn't ready to face. The decision to officially disband Led Zeppelin was made swiftly, but the emotional consequences lasted decades. Page refused lucrative reunion offers, massive tour guarantees, and global events that could have cemented their dominance even further. Each refusal wasn't stubbornness, it was protection. He couldn't stand the idea of standing on stage playing Bonham's parts while someone else tried to inhabit that space. Even when Zeppelin reunited briefly in 1985 for Live Aid and again in 2007 for the Ahmet Ertegun tribute concert with Bonham's son Jason on drums, Page approached it cautiously, emotionally guarded. Jason's presence made the experience meaningful but also bittersweet. Page has admitted that playing with Jason was both comforting and painful, as flashes of Bonham's power, humor, and wild spirit resurfaced with startling clarity. It reminded him of what was lost and what could never truly return. Over the years, Page has spoken less about technique and more about feeling when discussing Bonham. He has said that Bonham played drums the way Page played guitar, not as an instrument, but as an extension of personality. Their communication was almost wordless, built on glances, instincts, and trust. Losing that connection left Page creatively unmoored. Though he continued working on solo projects, film soundtracks, and archival releases, none carried the same urgency or fire. Page has admitted that part of him froze in 1980, that some creative doors closed forever the day Bonham died. He became a guardian of Led Zeppelin's legacy rather than a force pushing it forward. Remastering albums, curating live recordings, and protecting the band's image became acts of devotion rather than nostalgia. Bonham's absence shaped every decision Page made afterward, from declining reunions to resisting commercialization. He wanted the music to remain sacred, untouched by compromise. Privately, Page has described Bonham as the emotional anchor of the band, the one who balanced Robert Plant's mysticism, John Paul Jones's discipline, and Page's intensity. Without Bonham, the equilibrium collapsed. Page has reflected that Zeppelin thrived on tension, but Bonham grounded that tension in something human and unpredictable. His laughter, his explosive moods, his physicality, these were not replaceable qualities. As Page aged, grief transformed into reflection. He began to speak more openly about Bonham not just as a musician, but as a man, loyal, funny, deeply loving toward his family, and often overwhelmed by the scale of Zeppelin's fame. Page has said that Bonham never fully adjusted to being a global icon, that part of him remained rooted in Worcestershire, longing for simplicity. That longing, Page believes, was part of what made Bonham's playing so powerful and so dangerous. It came from a place of excess emotion, unfiltered and unprotected. In recent years, Page has acknowledged that Bonham's death forced him to confront mortality in a way nothing else could. Fame, success, and musical immortality suddenly felt fragile. He began to see Led Zeppelin not as an unstoppable force, but as a fleeting miracle, something that burned brightly precisely because it could not last. Bonham's passing marked the end of that fire. Page has said that while the world remembers Led Zeppelin as giants, he remembers them as four men navigating chaos together, leaning on one another without realizing how dependent they had become. Losing Bonham revealed that dependence in the harshest way possible. Even now, decades later, Page admits that certain songs remain difficult to hear, certain drum fills instantly transporting him back to moments of shared creation that feel impossibly distant. Bonham's presence lingers not just in recordings, but in Page's silences, in the projects he never pursued, in the roads he chose not to take. The end of Led Zeppelin was not a dramatic breakup or creative collapse, it was an act of mourning. Page has come to see that decision as one of the most honest things he ever did. Rather than dilute what they were, he chose to let it end intact. Bonham's death didn't just end a band, it reshaped how Page understood music, friendship, and legacy. He has said that Led Zeppelin existed because of trust, and once that trust was shattered by death, continuing felt impossible. In that sense, Bonham didn't just haunt Page, he guided him, reminding him that some bonds are too real to replace and some endings, however painful, are necessary. Led Zeppelin's silence after 1980 speaks as loudly as their music before it, and at the center of that silence is Jimmy Page, still carrying the echo of a drummer whose heartbeat once drove the loudest band in the world, and whose absence taught him that even legends must eventually listen to the quiet.